Good afternoon. This session is on how early should children start learning about their country. And we have an eminent panel. We have two academicians, three including myself, Professor Shiv Visvanathan, well-known sociologist from Jindal University, Mrs. Lata from Mumbai. She works among children especially. And we have a banker, author, historian, my friend, Mr. Sanjeev Sanyal. About 10 years back, Coimbatore-based International Forum for Indian Heritage conducted a study among school children. School children studying a 9th standard, 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard. It was a very big study. For the first time, the study was conducted among children. It was conducted in 278 schools across the country in 21 states. Questions were asked about their views on education system, and they were asked to give their opinions, their views, suggestions also. In fact, one of the suggestions that came about very frequently was this: we get to learn only about other countries but not about India. This was the students' views conducted in 21 states, and I think this sums up the need for the session. We all know that as far as the school curriculum, college curriculum is concerned, this Indian orientation is missing to a very large extent. India's history, functioning systems, achievements, limitations, failures, they are not properly discussed. There is a large-scale Western colonial orientation even today, as our friend from Cambridge University was pointing out. As a result, students are unaware of, one, the history, second, the functioning realities today. With the result, we are not producing students with proper understanding of our own country. And as a result, they are not able to contribute to the extent that they are expected. You know, India is an ancient nation. We have a very long history with pioneering achievements in different fields, whether it is science, mathematics, technology, town planning, even economics. But we don't teach this. You know, I am teaching in a management institute. Some of us, we are experimenting with these India-centric studies for the last 15-20 years. Even at the postgraduate level, the management students, if you ask them, most of them would say still, India is an agricultural country. Whereas service sector contributes more than 60-62% to the Indian economy, agricultural sector contributes only 14%, but this is how they perceive India. This is the biggest problem. And we are teaching failed theories even today. I often give this example. In 1997, Nobel Prize was given to economics for a theory called Black-Scholes theory. And the authors of that theory, for the first time, they wanted to practice their theory so that they thought they would make more money. So they resigned their jobs. Two professors, they resigned their jobs. They joined a company already promoted by economists and professors called LTCM, Long-Term Capital Management. So they joined that company as full-time advisors. There was huge expectation in the financial market because for the first time, a company was promoted by economists, professors, and two Nobel laureates are joining that company as full-time advisors to practice their own theory. You know, 1998, first year results came. The company incurred several times of initial capital, losses worth several times of initial capital. In fact, the company went bankrupt. Wall Street, Dow Jones Index declined. You know, these two professors immediately, they thought, it will not be possible for us to practice our theory. They went back to teaching. One of them is still teaching today. But their theory is being taught even today in India in all the management schools. And this is how we teach the theories. And we do not teach the practical realities. Some of us who are involved in this India-centric work, especially in economic, business, management aspects, we know that the functioning of India is something different. If you take the last 60, 68 years, India has been growing in spite of confusions, contradictions at the policy making level, at the macro policy making level, whether it was socialism or this free market policy. India has been continuously moving forward. So there is an Indian orientation here. We all believed till 2008 there was only universal models, because that is how we were taught. But now the Americans say there is no universal model. Now we understand that yes, there could be Indian model. But there are Indian models, whether it is economic models, social models, business models, management models, and we refuse to study. So we refuse to study the functioning realities, present realities, and even history. We don't study economic history. It's only the Westerners who come up and say, this is how your background was. And Angus Maddison from OECD, it was he who said, India remained as the topmost GDP nation, most prosperous nation, for about 80% of the time in the last 2000 years, because we don't give attention to it. And this is how we were taught. So this is the biggest problem for us. So it is important that we have to study India from the proper perspective. How early we have to start? There are different opinions. Experts say as early as possible, even at the preschool level, maybe even at preschool level, maybe from 4th standard. Some of the experts feel that, the study should be included, but not as studies in the form of stories, in the form of experiences. More more portion should be for the local history, local geography, because we don't discuss anything locally. If you go to school, they discuss about South American history, but not about Tamil history or Chennai history or Coimbatore history. It is not there. So these kinds of problems are there, but there are some initiatives that are being taken up. In Chennai, for example, I know there is an initiative for moral and cultural education. They have started this exercise and they have already expanded it to about 200, 300 schools. And in the first study that I mentioned, when students were asked to give their opinions, students themselves say, we want to know more about India, more about Indian heritage, Indian systems. So it is students who want it, and it is our duty to give more Indian-oriented kind of curriculum to them. So with this introduction, I invite Professor Shiv Visvanathan, senior most among all of us, to first give his views. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I must confess, I won't thank anyone, because I think Prabhu Chawla invited me by mistake. As a professor who has been dismissed from 4 colleges and just transferred from his last department, I've got to say, God save childhood from the Modi regime or any other regime. I think we have to face this fact. Let's begin with something simple. This model of India, which is based on a generation of people walking into IIT and IIM, destroys childhood. Nothing has destroyed childhood more than IIT and IIM, and nothing is as outdated as IIM and IIT. We've got 2 leading people here, but I think if you look at their own impact on trying to create innovation, I think their innovation has fallen on dead ears. And I think by invoking Startup India, Make in India, you're just talking rhetoric. Let's take Poonam Mahajan's speech. She says, India should be uniform. And in the next sentence, she talks about diversity. Diversity and uniformity don't go together. So either the politician gets an exercise in logic or looks at scholarship. How many kinds of India are there? It's not a battle between right and left. That's garbage. There's great scholarship to the right. There's great scholarship to the left. These are dissenting imaginations. And in the official history of right and left, which means BJP versus JNU, It is just two kinds of illiteracy which we are imposing on childhood. I mean, let me begin with my definition quickly, since there are only 7 minutes. When I was a child, I saw my sister drawing a map, which went Padmini Visvanathan, 1 Bagmati Road, Circuit House area, Chota Nagpur, San Francisco, Tamil Nadu, globe, planet. Beautiful geography. But I think that geography is preferable to the geography of the nation state, because her geography is inventive. It discovers place. It's a theory of space and place. For heaven's sakes, childhood is something playful. Don't turn it into an official program of the nation state. Childhood is dream time. What we have is governmental projects and official professors destroying the dream of childhood. Leave it alone. So what are you going to say? All the rest of India which doesn't enter IIT is not Indian? Well, I never passed my science exam, so I shouldn't be the one saying it. I think the first thing we got to realize is childhood is a time of invention, of joy. I don't see any joy in IIT or Mr. Modi. And without the sense of joy, without the sense of the dream, which I know many of the leading IIM professors have emphasized, this sense of playfulness is lost. As one of my friends in Raman Institute said, our scientists are very good as summarizers. They're not originals. And this is the problem with IIT. It teaches convergence, not divergence. Children should be quarrelsome. They should come up with a different set of answers. They need different kinds of professors to tell them truth is different in different occasions. I think one of the greatest dangers of seminars like this is you might destroy childhood. Forget destroying India. India may not be destroyed so easily, but you're going to do a terrific job destroying childhood. Leave childhood alone. Don't subject it to the Planning Commission or the RSS or the leftist agendas or to anyone from the BJP. Because when you do that, I think something beautiful is lost in India, the dream time of childhood. Second, a child needs to understand the nation state is different from a civilization. All of you are talking official history. Give the child more folklore, more storytelling. Take the child seriously as a child instead of an aspiring IIT graduate. We have destroyed India by thinking all of us want to join IIT. I don't. Of course, I can't. But more important, I'm not interested in an India governed by IIT and IIM. Second, allow for diversity in a real sense. My friend U.R. Anantmurthy would say, the beauty of India is that illiterates speak 5 languages and the convent school girl speaks 1. When there's such a diversity in India, don't reduce that diversity with an official program. My friend Wes Jackson said something brilliant. I just got up and made a speech when he suddenly said, you Indians are such dolts. I said, what did I do? He said, you called America a high information society. And just after that, you said, India has 100,000 varieties of rice. We Americans destroyed the apple from 166 varieties of apple to 6. Which is the high information society? India or USA? I think we need to ask the right kind of questions. Because if you have that plurality, which some of my friends were trying to emphasize, that plurality has to be created playfully, not as an official agenda. Teaching is playfulness. But the seriosity, to want of a better word, that we're imposing on the seminar will devastate childhood. Let me push it further. I think we have a center-periphery colonial model of education. We always want to beat the West or imitate it. Why? The Indian national movement was more confident. It wanted to rescue the West from modernity. So why don't we go back to the real idea of Indian nationalism? A childhood which actually thought it could invent other Wests. There's no one single West. There's no one single India. So why should we impose one West or one India? I mean, look at the debate that we began with. It's either Indian or foreign, left or right. Are these the oppositions we need today? So if I am a foreign returned nationalist, I have no place in India. Or two, if I want to learn English, I'm anti-national. What kind of garbage policy is this? Childhood is the right to dream and decide. And we are confusing excellence with rankings. So instead of UGC, you'll have NAC. And either way, you'll destroy the country, because science is about invention. Science is about creating new kinds of theories and new kinds of possibilities. And standardized agencies don't create it. A child has to invent, not get the correct answer in a pre-board entry exam. And because we teach them correct answers, they are no longer scientists, they are no longer inventors, they are no longer learners. The best way to destroy democracy is to destroy childhood. And I think the Modi government, like the previous government, is doing a fantastic job destroying childhood. Let's be clear. Because if we don't face up to these facts, and we as a group don't tell the government, and we keep clapping every time the Poonam Mahajans and the Smriti Iranis talk, then I think we have to challenge them. Because this consensus was fake. And education demands dissent, debate, difference. We didn't have it so far. So actually we need a child to tell the BJP emperor he has no clothes. I think it's absolutely important we do that. I think what I want to emphasize is there's great scholarship in India, but few scholars have been invited by the BJP for the debate. Even the best scholars from the right have not been invited by the BJP. The BJP has not really explored the works of Dharampal. The BJP has not explored alternative histories of different kinds. And childhood should be the availability of alternatives, not uniformity, not standardization. Where are the alternative histories? History didn't begin with Nehru and end with Indira Gandhi. There have been hundreds of alternative histories in India. Where are they entering the syllabus? We treat the syllabus as if it's a constitutional agenda. A syllabus is an act of cooking up and dreaming. You don't need permission to change it, Mr. Prabhu Chawla. I also come from the Delhi School of Economics. We change the course every semester, regardless of what Delhi University thought. I'm not going to wait for some government to tell me I can change the course once in 10 years. Teachers have been doing it. And today you want to governmentalize us? Of course, it's true. A lot of knowledge is downloaded knowledge. But a lot of teachers are great researchers, great scholars, who understand what childhood is about. Is there a place for them in this government? I think these are questions we have to ask. I may not be invited next year, but by that time, I want to make sure that the destruction of childhood stops today in this place. Thank you.
I invite Sanjeev Sanyal to give his views.
Good afternoon. And the topic of today is, how early should children start learning about their country? Now that's a rather absurd question. what should children be learning about, if not about their country? So I'm going to say that I think it's much more interesting to talk about a slightly different issue. What is it that children should be taught, and in what medium should they be taught? Now, if you're going to go and teach children about their country, the most obvious things to teach them is obviously about the history and geography and culture of their country. Unfortunately, most of what is there being taught by our school system curriculums is not even our history or geography. In fact, as I will discuss, much of the history books that we have today is the history of our foreign invaders. Now, the problem is, much of the history books that you now read is first and foremost not the history of India at all. It's the history of Delhi and of the dynasties that have ruled Delhi all the way to the present. So, you don't learn the history at all. If you are not from this part of the country, most likely you have never heard of the Cholas, you've not heard of the Pallavas, you've probably never heard of the great Vijayanagar Empire at all. If it hadn't been for Bajirao Mastani, many people here would never have heard of Bajirao, who was one of the greatest generals of Indian history. And incidentally, he was not the kind of person who would drown himself like a lovelorn Romeo. If you hadn't been from Assam, you would probably never have heard of Lasit Borphukon, the great Ahom general, who at the height of the Mughal Empire destroyed Aurangzeb's army and sank it into the Brahmaputra. Now, this is really the history of India, not the history of the Delhi Sultanate. So, first and foremost, we need to write the history of India. And there are many histories of India. But of course, it is impractical to teach every single version of history, but at least let us begin to write our own history. Because the history that we are writing, as I mentioned, is not our history at all, but the history of foreign invasions. And it was deliberately over hundreds of years of being ruled by these foreign invaders, our history was edited in order to clearly show us as being continuous losers. So we are taught about the 3 battles of Panipat, we are taught about the Battle of Plassey, but we are never taught about the battles we won. And believe you me, the reason our civilization is still alive is because we won many of these battles and saved our civilization by spilling a lot of blood. This is why, unless you happen to be from southern Kerala, you would probably never have heard of Martanda Varma, or of the fact that at the Battle of Kolachal in the early 18th century, Martanda Varma defeated what was then the greatest maritime power in the world, the Dutch East India Company. Now, the Dutch East India Company in the early 18th century had conquered what is now Indonesia. They had taken over southern Africa, they had taken over Sri Lanka, and they were going to now take over India. And if it hadn't been for Martanda Varma and his victory at the Battle of Kolachal, I would have been giving this speech in Dutch. And yet, almost nobody knows about him. And I can keep going on for several hours with example after example after example, which have been edited out systematically out of our history. In fact, it's a part of the colonial process to tell us that we owed everything to these coming invaders. So in fact, they invented something called the Asian theory to tell us that even the civilization we have is a gift from white-looking people coming in from in Central Asia. There is actually no archaeological evidence for this Aryan invasion. There is no genetic evidence. There is no text ever said anything about it. And yet we continue to perpetuate it. Why? Because the British wanted to tell us that their ruling our country was simply a matter of giving us a civilizational, a software update, and that they should continue to rule us forever because we should be so grateful that they were giving us the software update. And this has been perpetuated in all kinds of small little ways. And it's systematically done, by the way. When kids read Phantom and Tarzan comics, what are they being told? They're really being told that you dark-skinned people are not capable of looking after yourself. There needs to be some white-skinned guy to be telling you how to live your lives and protect you. It is really a part of the same agenda. It's the Aryan invasion theory. Now, every country that was colonized was given this kind of similar theory. The Africans were told this, the Australians were, Aborigines were told this, the Native Americans were told this. But in each case, over time, they have edited out and changed their history to tell their own narrative. In fact, as the African proverb goes, so as long as the lions do not have their own storytellers, history will always eulogize the hunter. And that is the problem with us. We are not telling our own history. And incidentally, every time I bring up all these issues to historians, they actually agree with me. But when I say, why don't you then change the syllabus? I say, oh, no, we can't do this under this government, because if we do this, they will introduce right-wing biases into the textbooks. Oh, really? So is that the excuse for carrying on perpetuating colonial-era biases, Nehruvian-era biases, Marxist biases? What we need is a real debate about the evidence. Of course, there can be a multiplicity of views on it. I agree with Professor Visvanathan. But let us be very clear. We are allowed our opinions. We are not allowed our facts. Now, that is not the only problem with our education system. When we are talking about a more Indian education, obviously a very important part of that has got to be Indian languages. And I'm afraid to say that Indian language curriculums and Indian language literature generally is dying. And you know why it is dying? Because almost everything in our textbooks is hopelessly outdated. I mean, you go to any textbook in any Indian language, and I can't claim for Tamil, but I can tell you this for certainly the languages I can read, Hindi and Bengali. Almost all the literature that is taught is stuck somewhere in the 1930s, 40s, 50s. At most, they will get to the 70s. And here we are in the second half of the second decade of the 21st century, and you read our textbooks. I mean, forget about laptops and cell phones that any child can see all around them. That's nowhere near getting in the textbooks. But you do not even have, you just read the Indian language literature textbooks. You do not even have mention of televisions or aeroplanes. There's essentially, we are stuck in those few decades over there. Now, I'm not saying that everything has to be modernized to modern times. If you want to even give a sense of an older, use the Indian languages to give the children a sense of their older civilizational history, even that is not being done. Because if you read the textbooks, very few of them will be a way of conveying, for example, the great literature of the past. So it is very possible to grow up in India and be taught Shakespeare. At least in the elite schools, you'll be taught Shakespeare. But it's very, very likely you would not have read any of the great writers in Sanskrit or Tamil or other classical languages that are there. So it's very likely you know more about Macbeth than about Shakuntala or about the epics. And the reason is that it is systematically been knocked out of the curriculum. It is, if you try and bring some of it in, you will say, oh, it is saffronization or something like that. But in fact, it is none of that. You're neither teaching the old, nor are you modernizing it. All you're doing is perpetuating 1950s, 60s literature. And why is that happening? Because all of Indian languages have unfortunately come under the control of these great academies, which are dominated by these patriarchs, who think that India is still stuck in their childhood or in the time when they wrote their great works. Now, Bengali, for example, the language that is my mother tongue, used to have a great tradition of writing science fiction, of writing detective novels, of writing all kinds of interesting new stuff. And today, it has been reduced to becoming the language of boring art films. Why? because of this official system and I have been witness myself to it through as growing up in Calcutta, how much of this was brought under the control of these sort of thought controllers, so much so that even the great works of people like Rabindranath Tagore were not allowed to be performed in anything but the officially sanctioned way. So you had this bizarre situation that you could have if you actually did a play by Tagore or sang a song by Tagore, your program could be shut down because you did not follow the official sanctioned way of doing it. And this is the kind of thought control that was there. And now, when I hear about some of those same people who are imposing these sorts of controls, returning their awards because of intolerance, all I have to say, it's ridiculous. So, what I am arguing for is, yes, we need plurality. Yes, we need new material. Yes, we need to indigenize. But what we first of all need is to agree that there is a serious problem with the existing curriculum, and by simply throwing it up and say, oh, it's all bad and let's all childhood be happy, where the fact is, you've got to have some standardization, you've got to have some modernization. Otherwise, what you will have is a perpetuation of the same mess that we have now. So I think we need a reasonable national debate on this whole issue. With that, I'm going to stop.
Thank you, Mrs. Lata ji.
Namaskar. I usually don't say this, thanking the people who invite me. But today I'm saying it with great sense of meaning, a great depth. Because I think about 22 years ago, maybe 22 years ago, when I was doing my master's in social work at Tata Institute of Social Science, there was a remark that I made and got labeled Saffron Brigade. And after that, the mic is not given to me, usually. This, topic about, we are allowed our opinions, not facts. I don't even think you're allowed an opinion. Doesn't matter if you belong to any brigade. So whoever's up there pulling strings for me to be here, I'm seriously in gratitude. I want to start with something Gabriel Garcia Marquez said. I don't know if our students are familiar with his struggle. He wrote these amazing books, Autumn of the Patriarch. So he says history is, cornered by before the patriarch and after the patriarch, which obviously means before the patriarch, wiped out. After the patriarch, completely fabricated. I'm not even going into things like Aryan invasion theory. It's ridiculous because Max Muller himself, the guy who created the Aryan invasion theory, invented it, in his book Home of the Aryas, debunks his own theory. He debunks his own theory. Check out, I had to make a disclaimer before I start because all this information comes from our headquarters in the West. Straight from the British collectors' records. They don't come from the RSS headquarters because I'm constantly, 2 weeks ago in one of the hallowed institutions, I saw tolerance happening or dissent happening at its greatest. I was called RSS Brigade, I was called Manuvadi, I was called Brahminvadi, though I don't belong to any of these groups and I belong to all these groups. So, Gabriel Garcia Marquez said this. The damage to reality is at least as much political as cultural. Truth has been controlled to the point at which it has ceased to be possible to find out what it is. The only truth is that you are being lied to all the time. Now, I don't know, how early or whatever, because I have a problem with this whole education system. There was a question I wanted to ask with the first session. What is education? I mean, have we What we are talking about is Macaulay's, what he called essential literacy programs. It's not education. There is a difference between literacy and education. I hear these comments, we were 70% illiterate. My father's place was the place where founders of women's education. I mean, seriously, we need some training thing for all our people. I don't know how many of you all have even heard of Dharampal, read Dharampal. We used to have, until 1750, 100,000 schools in each presidency. At that time, England used to have only 500 schools. And Dharampal ji is a person who, for 10 years, because he didn't get, patronization, to use the correct word, went to England, sat there for 10 years in their libraries, and wrote this down. I have copies with me if someone wants checking, because, somebody can spout out saying that we started women's education is ridiculous. Because, somebody talked of Amartya Sen. Amartya Sen is a person who says we learned democracy from Akbar, who I call the original jihadi. Seriously. Jodha Akbar, Salim Anarkali. Anarkali was a myth. Noor Jahan was the love of his life. She was the 20th wife of Jahangir. And she ruled India, and she was from Persia. Persia, a civilization destroyed by the Arabs. Completely destroyed. Now, I'm here not as right, left, because I think these are ridiculous isms that the West has created to divide and rule us. It continues till date. I am worried only about the Indian child, who everybody else is talking about, except the real stakeholders, which is mothers, their families, the communities. And when I talk of communities, I include gurus. I don't use the word teachers, because they've been reduced to managers today. They only manage. They cannot teach. And when did teaching come into? We were learning institutions. Khalil Gibran said, if you're a true guru, you place your child, your true guru will take you to the threshold of wisdom. That's it. Today we are indoctrinating our students. There was a speaker who was invited 2 weeks ago at Tata Institute, and they threatened to burn his books. He wanted to engage with them, no, but, and I'm a student. I've lectured across India. I have been a Fulbright student. I've been invited to the US. And the kind of engagement that happens, nobody claps when you say something that they agree with or disagree with. But you don't have an opinion anymore. You belong to one or the other. I am here only for the child. I don't care about the man. I don't care about the women. I care only about the Indian child, and I care about families. We have been turned around, and I think you should be worried. I hope you go home agitated, because I started off as a special educator. For 23 years, I worked with what you're like to call differently abled children. These are just nomenclatures. There's no differently abled. They're seriously mentally challenged. It is a truth that you have to accept. I worked for 23 years with mentally challenged children. And you know what should frighten you? I moved out from special education. I did my master's in social work. I got to know the so-called normal children, what we call the normal children. And, children form 40 to 44% of our population. And they're the least prioritized agenda. And what should worry, or what leaves me most agitated at this kind of discourse that is overtaken us, is that the problems that I used to see in my mentally challenged children, I am seeing in your so-called normal children. And I'm forced to use this word normal in quotes, because that makes my special children abnormal. But I'm saying normal as in Dalit, Hindu, Muslim, rich, poor, urban, rural. And this rural thing is absolute bullshit, because whether you come from Arunachal or Madras or some village in Kumbakonam or somewhere, everybody aspires to the urban life. This is what George Ritzer talks of, McDonaldization of the world. So it is not about America or England or China or whatever. We've been completely uniformitized, whether you like it or not. If the poor, my PhD study was 1,100 families. I talked to 1,100 mothers and 42 stakeholders, the real stakeholders, not politicians, not academicians, real people, which means doctors, therapists, the mullah, the priest, the pandit, the Christian priest, the aunt, uncle, neighbor, all these people, doctors who were part of our families. We just had one family doctor. I got a minor surgery done recently. I spent $1 lakh for something that would have taken like 5,000 ordinarily, but this therapist, that test, whatever. My whole point here becomes that one is that I find that what are you going to teach your child? What country? What are you teaching? Dr. Kanagasabapathi ji said this, that we don't know anything about our country. I'm sorry, we are learning about our country, but we are learning Macaulay's version of the country. So according to that, you watch TV today, Hindi movies. You watch TV. And what are they showing you? That in India, pick up any Hindi serial, pick up, and what is being taught? We molest our children, we burn our women, we exploit them, we torture widows. Then there is bonded labor. There is a new serial started now about the Devdasi system. Then there is girls, girls were not celebrated, which is a fact. I can give you written records by Westerners of how India celebrated the feminine. We don't commodify our women, we don't enslave them. We celebrated until we got colonized, but I think we still colonized. And the second thing is that how early should we start learning about our countries? Who is going to teach us about our country? Macaulay must be dancing in his grave, really. You know what he said? His purpose for introducing English education, removing the 100,000 Gurukulas in each presidency was, we must do our best to form a class who may be interpreters between us and the millions whom we govern. A class of persons, please note, Indians in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. And he must be celebrating. Because anywhere I go, I see this kind of discourse. So it depends which side you are. I'm not on anybody's side. I'm on this child's side. And you know what? How early? How are you going to teach your child about culture, tell me? My research shows, and this is across caste, religion, or whatever boundaries and isms you all have created, is that at 11 months, product development starts. We are not raising children anymore. It's called product development. There's this lady, Nancy, I've forgotten her name. She calls it product development. And the West is great at labels, So they come up with things like, product development is raising your children to, become this IIT or whatever is the favorite word here, or this Harvard return. I'm using these, these labels because it's commonly used with me. And we have words like overscheduled, hurried child, helicopter parenting, all these issues that come in. And believe me, we were people, we contributed 30% to the world's GDP until 1750. In 1950, we become something like 3 or 4%. I don't know the correct figures, but it's around that much. Now, if you want to know what really ails the child, I think the earlier speaker used the word killing childhood. There is a book by this Buckingham guy. It's called Death of Childhood. I think we've killed childhood completely. And we talk of words, you talk of childhood, immediately people will talk of ADHD, learning disabilities, autism. Please, this is not our problem. You know what our problems are? I deal with 8-year-olds with vitamin D deficiencies. I deal with what we have created is an obesogenic culture. I deal with hyperactivity, attention deficit hyperactivity, a great decline in critical inquiry, no reasoning, malnourishment not in the poor. I'm dealing with it in the older children, the rich children. I'll give you more because this is important. I think this should worry you. Reading levels are going down in international schools. I had this child who came in the 7th standard, did not know the meaning of role model. And you ask in terms of aspirations, what country are you going to teach? Every child, every parent wants the child to go abroad. And they don't even want to come back because they take 40 lakh loans and they want to go abroad. They have to, pay for it back. So they don't want to come back. So what country are we going to teach our children about? Then we have depression, suicide, hyperactivity, and complete lack of resilience. If today we are sitting here talking in English or whatever and making it an turning it to our advantage, it's because we were resilient. It didn't matter what language. Another thing that should frighten you is mother tongue. Only 48% speak the mother tongue, and out of which 80% come from the India Shining population, where they only know one language. And why is it important to learn your mother tongue? Because then you can learn 5 languages. He's right. 5 languages I could speak. Today, children cannot even speak English properly because they're neither here nor there. And, we are following a model, a Western model, where 35 children die out of gun violence daily. 7,000 children drop out of school. The average life coaching, where they teach sex education in America, has come down from 14 to 9 years. These are things that should worry you. Abstinence has replaced safe sex because they're dealing with a fatherless America. Seriously. 50 to 60% of theirs are teen pregnancies, not willing to, they don't know how to raise their children. So we have children dying half their age or the lifespan before their parents. So to end it, because there are a lot of issues that I can bring up which we can, come up later with. My whole point is, it's not how early you want to start, teaching your children about the country. What is important is you need to reclaim the families. There are no families. Children today are outsourced. They are outsourced to the service industry. So a child is being raised starting at 11 months. He goes for tuition classes, extracurricular activity classes, and he is in a digital education. Do you know all these people who talked of, digital education, or what Spengler calls weapons of mass destruction? They're all the Steve Jobs of Microsoft or whatever, that comes up. Steve Jobs, his company, he had no gadgets in his house. They ate together. He banned it from his home. Same with Bill Gates. Their children attend schools where they sit on the floor and do painting. Of course, children want to dream and desire, but let them have a childhood. 0 to 6, they should not be out in any school. They should be in communities and with peers. Neither the politician nor the academician, because the academician comes with an agenda. Has to be in terms of how do you reclaim your families and communities. We are a culture of aparigriha, consuming just how much you want, and interdependence. Yes, just wait. Culture of, no, it's important. What I'm saying is important because you're talking about the child and nobody represents the child, whether abroad or here. I'm the only one who does it. And I'm saying that with great humility. I'm not saying it with anger. My point here becomes that we were a culture of aparigriha and we were a culture of interdependence. Today, it is about individualism and consumerism. So how, buy your own pack kind of thing. So if we need to reclaim our children, if you want to make them happy, you have to bring back the families. You have to bring back unstructured play, which I think very strongly about. And today, our children are nutritionally deficient because our food cultures have gone in. So first, think of the brain development. Whatever food that we eat today has been taken out. We have to go back to our traditional methods. I'm not talking of saffronization on Hindu or Indian or Muslim or whatever. I'm just saying go back to your systems where we were healthy. We lived to 100, 150 years. Illness was not there. Very importantly, till the 17th century, there was no disability, there was no cancers, there was no nothing. 200 years later, I'm dealing with children with 5 disabilities. That itself should make you want to go back to find out what was right with our systems. I end with a very brief, what would you call? I've turned it around a little. There is this very short story of, a person makes a snowman. I think I changed it to a lady. After a little time, she finds that it starts melting. Very quietly, she goes and she puts it back from the mountains. I don't know if you get what I'm saying, but it's a huge thing. I can't remember who wrote this very short story, a Japanese. The snowman is made in the city. The sun comes out and it starts melting. Very quietly, she removes it and goes and puts it back into the mountains. I think we need to do that with our children. Just set them back to their childhoods. Thank you.
Thank you, speakers. 3 different experts from different fields. They have presented their views. Do we have time for questions? Niti, Pallavi? 3 questions are allowed. Very quick. Brief and quick.
Veera Raghavan, representing SASTRA University. Don't trust whatever published. Do research. You are talking about some Max Muller. Yes? Don't trust whatever published. Please do research. That's it.
That's a comment, so it's okay.
I am Sharma here again. I would like to know how you can remove the disparity between the have and have-nots. The poor children and the rich children going to private schools and going to the poor school in the villages. How you can remove this disparity?
I think we'll just take all 3 questions and then each answer all of them. That'll be faster. Can we have 2 more questions and then we can...
Hi, I'm Vali and I run a school. So my reason for being here is much more just very similar to all the 3 speakers today, because I totally reflect and I'm very, very concerned about the future of our country. And more importantly, if the 3 speakers could somewhere say, where's the sense of hope in all of this for us? What is the way forward? Because I think this is what we should be discussing. Somewhere, Mr. Prabhu Chawla should be actually getting more people in policy or in education spaces or in people who are developing curriculum today to be here. Because today, I can't be sitting and changing an ICSE board's curriculum or a CBSE. I do that. Believe me, just like the first speaker spoke, we changed the curriculum. We threw it out of the window and start from scratch. But then, what are the other schools doing? They all are followers. They're all not leaders like us. We are the pioneers. We're doing a little bits in little drops of the ocean. What is the sense of hope that you all, as speakers, can give us?
Yeah, last question and then we'll all answer.
Hello. Sir, I have a question here. My name is Libin from Dr. MJ University. I'm asking this just out of curiosity. I would like to know what is the exact age group at which children should be learning about their country? That's all.
Yeah.
No, each one will answer each question, whichever one.
Can I ask?
It's a lovely bureaucratic question because childhood has beginnings and limits. And I think if you treat it that way, it's going to be a problem because childhood is not a universal category. There are different notions of childhood in different cultures. So stop bureaucratizing it. What looks like a smart question actually is the beginning of the defeat of childhood. Second, look, with every difficult question, with every dissenter, there is hope. The more we quarrel, the more beautifully democratic we could be. And I think that's part of what you're trying to say. But I wouldn't get sentimental about hope, because I think we are in the garbage can, and I think it's going to take a lot of effort to clean up. In a very strange way, we're being outthought and outfought by other countries. We need a different kind of scholarship to beat that. I think you can see the roots of some of these things. But they have to survive, and I think I'm not quite sure of their survival. Beyond that, the other question was a comment. Do more research. Yes. Give me a few more grants. It might be helpful.
Okay. I will just take 1 minute because he took my name in the speech that even by mistake he was invited. No. We do a thorough research. We do a thorough research and we wanted you to be a... No, I'm also sending some humor because we wanted humor in this hall also. Therefore, we thought you will provide us the best humor, so we invited you here. That's what it is. And you told us that we should not tell the child what to learn and we should not let him learn himself. I would just like to say my grandchild is now 5-year-old. He would ask me one day question, which country I am born in. Who will tell him that? Who will tell him that? Somebody will teach him, which country he has been born. Should I tell him America, India, in London, whatever? Because somebody has to teach him that you are born in a particular country. Because your philosophy is that we should not tell the child anything.
No.
That is if I misunderstood.
To be born in a country is different from being born in a nation. I can talk about locality. I can talk about region. I can talk about neighborhood as country. And I think that's as important as talking about the nation state.
No,
just saying you're Indian doesn't explain anything. I think the beauty of India is we had so many identities. At one level, as Dalai Lama once put it brilliantly, every time George Bush speaks, he brings out the Muslim in me. I want to say, I have multiple identities. I want to retain that.
No, that's...
because I think this certificate of one nationality, Prabhu, I'm not ready to accept. I understand your responsibilities as a grandfather, but I hope your child has too.
No, my responsibility, as you rightly pointed out, when Obama speaks, he says, I American, we the Americans, and we are ashamed of calling ourselves we the Indians. That's a debate. I hand it here. We'll discuss it sometime.
Thank you very much for your cooperation. We will close the session as it's already late. Wait for 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes.
A big thank you and a round of applause to all of our speakers. And we request Mr. Chawla to please present all of you with the special